Ethan Reyes had never been particularly lucky, especially not on rainy Wednesdays in the middle of October. The clouds above Portland hung low heavy with mist like they'd been stitched directly into the skyline. He sat in his aging Honda Civic with the heater wheezing and a coffee-stained delivery receipt fluttering on the passenger seat. The day had already served him a parking ticket, a flat tire, and a spilled latte, but nothing compared to what was about to happen at 4:47 p.m. on Northeast 37th Avenue. He was backing out of a narrow driveway after dropping off a bouquet of apology flowers for a cheating boyfriend. The customer hadn't tipped classic. Ethan adjusted the rear view, shifted into reverse, and crept backward just as a flash of chrome caught his eye. Crunch. The sound was unmistakable, not catastrophic, but definitely more than a scratch. Ethan slammed the brakes. "Oh, come on," he muttered. He jumped out into the drizzle, heart thudding. His rear bumper was slightly dented, kissed by the front end of a mint-condition, cherry-red Mustang fastback. It looked like it had rolled straight out of a '70s car ad. Then he saw her. The woman stepped out of the driver's seat in a navy raincoat, her hair somewhere between chestnut and silver tucked in a loose bun. She moved with an athletic kind of grace, even as she scowled at the bumper. "I didn't even see you coming," Ethan said, hands raised like he was under arrest. She surveyed the damage coolly. "It's not terrible. My fault. I cut the corner too fast again." "Again, I'm Ethan," he offered, uncertainly extending a hand. She gave him a quick glance and shook it firmly. "Joanna, don't worry, I can fix it." Ethan blinked. "Wait, what?" "The dent. I have a garage 2 blocks from here. Welding rig, full tools. I restore cars. You're lucky it's a simple job." "You restore cars?" She folded her arms. "You think women over 40 just do yoga and watch HGTV? No, I mean, cool. Very cool." Ethan followed her through the neighborhood, his car trailing the Mustang, like a kid following a cooler older sibling. She turned into an alley, hit a keypad, and the garage door rolled up. Inside was something between a mad scientist lab and a car museum. Tools hung in perfect alignment. A vintage Corvette sat under a tarp. Rock music played softly from a speaker. It smelled like oil dust and leather, and somehow it felt more alive than anywhere he'd been in weeks. "Park it here," she said, nodding to the open space. He pulled in, still dazed. "So you really fix cars?" Joanna arched an eyebrow as she pulled off her raincoat, revealing a faded t-shirt that read, "Women weld better." "You're kind of blowing my mind right now," he muttered. She smirked. "Get in line." She worked with surgical precision, pulling down a dent repair tool and heat gun. Ethan offered to help and was promptly handed a rag. "Clean while I work. You'll learn something." Ethan mumbled, "That's what my mom used to say." Joanna didn't reply, but a small smile tugged at her lips. After 30 minutes, the dent was mostly gone. It wasn't showroom perfect, but it looked better than it had in years. "Wow," Ethan said, genuinely impressed. "You fixed that like it was nothing." Joanna wiped her hands on a towel. "It's not rocket science. Most things just need patience and attention." He watched her for a beat. "Wish someone had taught me that earlier." Joanna glanced over. "First car?" "Third. First one I paid for myself. Name cars have names. Oh, Trisha." Joanna chuckled. "She looks more like a Mildred. Sturdy, overworked, underappreciated. You just described me exactly." Rain pattered against the garage door as the sky darkened. Joanna pulled out a thermos and offered him a cup. Ethan took a sip. "This is good. You roast your own beans, too." "No, I just know what I like. No sugar, no cream, just the real thing." He nodded, watching her as she leaned against her workbench. She looked content, not happy, not sad, just grounded. "Do you do this for a living?" he asked. "I used to build engines for race cars. Then I didn't. Now I restore what's worth restoring." He studied her face, unsure what she meant. "You're not going to ask," she said. "Ask what, how I ended up in a garage alone with a dented Mustang and grease under my nails. I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would." She tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle. "Most people just jump in with advice or assumptions," she said. "You're not most people. I drive flowers to strangers' houses and talk to my car. I'm definitely not most people." They shared a quiet laugh. For a moment, the rain and the world outside disappeared. Ethan stood and stretched. Well, Joanna, this has been one hell of a detour. She nodded. Could have been worse. You could have hit me harder. Next time I'll aim better. She shot him a playful glare. Try it and I'll make Trisha a lawn ornament. He grinned, noted. As he moved toward the car, Joanna said, you know it's not fully done. Still a little more buffing to do. Come back tomorrow if you want. Ethan paused. Sure, why not? What time, any time? I'm not going anywhere. He looked at her, really looked at her. I'll bring coffee. Black, of course. Ethan sat in his apartment later that night, a cheap lamp casting shadows across the room. He should have been editing delivery routes or calling his mom back. Instead, he stared at his phone, Joanna's name typed into a note under coolest weird stuff that happened this year. He didn't know why he'd go back. Not really. Maybe it was the Mustang. Maybe it was the way she fixed a dent without blinking. Or maybe it was the way she made the silence feel safe. Ethan showed up the next afternoon with 2 coffees and a smile he didn't even realize he was wearing. The rain had taken a break and a rare shaft of sunlight cut through the gray, warming the alleyway behind Joanna's garage. He hesitated before knocking, then laughed at himself. She wasn't the type who needed a heads up. So he knocked once and the door creaked open before he could knock again. You're early, Joanna said, wiping grease from her hands with a shop rag. You said any time, Ethan replied, holding up the drinks, and I thought this might make me more tolerable. She gave him a nod of approval. You remembered Black. I don't take chances with women who know how to weld. That earned him a real smile, small but not guarded. He followed her inside. The Mustang gleamed under a new coat of wax, the dent now barely noticeable. But it wasn't the car that held his attention. It was the way Joanna moved, like she was always solving something invisible in the air around her. I buffed the edge this morning, she said, gesturing to his Civic. Told you it had come out. Ethan examined the rear panel. You weren't kidding. I never am. Is that a warning? A reminder? He leaned against a workbench, sipping his coffee. So, Joanna, you've got this entire setup, a cool Mustang, and a better caffeine game than every place I deliver to. What's the catch? No catch, she said, reaching for a wrench. I just like machines more than most people. Why, they make sense. He tilted his head. That's kind of sad. She looked at him, then back at the wrench. It's kind of true. There was a beat of silence then. Want to learn how to weld? Ethan blinked. Is that a trick question? She tossed him a pair of gloves. You look like someone who needs to make something. He spent the next hour under her careful eye, clumsily dragging a welding torch across a piece of scrap metal. She corrected his grip, adjusted his stance, and laughed when he accidentally fused his gloves together. You're a mess, she said, amused. Yet you invited me back. Who's the real mess? He could feel her watching him, not judgmental, just curious, like she was trying to figure out what to do with someone who didn't want anything from her except her time. After they took a break, he leaned against the wall, watching her inspect a rusty old carburetor with the kind of reverence priests gave relics. You know, he said, most people your age are planning cruises or selling essential oils online. She didn't look up. Is that your nice way of calling me old? No, it's my nice way of calling you cooler than everyone else I know. That made her laugh again, lower this time, less filtered. I used to build engines for formula cars, she said suddenly. Years ago, it was all I wanted. Fast cars, fast tracks. My team won in Monaco. Ethan raised his eyebrows. You raced. No, I built what other people raced. Men took credit for it, but I was there. What happened? Joanna shrugged like she was brushing off a memory. Got tired, got married, got out. He nodded. You don't talk about him. No reason to. There was something in her tone that made Ethan back off for now. So you just fix up old cars now? I find things people gave up on, she said. Sometimes they still run. He looked at her carefully. That sounds a lot like you. She gave him a look, part warning, part challenge, but didn't push him away. Later, as they stood side by side, wiping grease off their hands, Ethan asked, You always this generous to guys who hit your car? She smirked. Only the ones who talk to their vehicles and bring decent coffee. Good to know. He hesitated, then added, You want to go for a drive sometime? Joanna raised an eyebrow. You asking me out or asking to drive the Mustang? Little bit of both. She didn't answer, just tossed him the keys. Clean it first, then we'll see. He caught them stunned. Seriously, you break it, you buy me dinner. So it's a date. It's an insurance policy. As he slid behind the wheel, heart pounding, Joanna walked around to the passenger side, and for the first time in a long time, for both of them, it felt like maybe life wasn't done throwing surprises. Ethan hadn't expected to drive a vintage Mustang on a Thursday. He definitely hadn't expected Joanna stoic, solitary Joanna to sit in the passenger seat, one leg propped up on the dash, as if she'd done this with him 100 times before. Be gentle with her, she said without looking over. I'm always gentle, Ethan replied. Easing the gear shift into first, Joanna side-eyed him. I can tell. The engine rumbled like a heartbeat as they pulled out of the alley and onto the open road. It was one of those rare Pacific Northwest afternoons when the clouds gave way to a wide blue sky and the city felt almost cinematic. Old brick buildings blurred past, and the Mustang purred down Burnside like it remembered what freedom felt like. Ethan glanced at her, then back at the road. You ever just take her out and go nowhere? Used to, Joanna said when things got too quiet. He looked at her again, slower this time. Too quiet. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she rolled the window down, letting the wind pull strands of hair from her bun. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely, she said. I learned that too late. Ethan downshifted without comment. They drove in silence for a while, letting the road do the talking. Finally, at her suggestion, he pulled off near a scenic overlook just outside the city. The sun sat low in the sky, drenching everything in gold. Mountains loomed in the distance. Trees swayed in the breeze. It felt like a movie set, too beautiful to be real. Joanna leaned back in the seat and closed her eyes. This is where I used to bring him. Ethan didn't have to ask who she meant. He liked silence, she said, and the sound of engines. I thought we were the same that way. Turns out we were just pretending not to need people. Ethan waited a beat. Was it a bad ending? No, that's the worst part, she said softly. It was a good marriage. He died too early. Heart attack, middle of the night. I woke up and she trailed off. Everything went quiet after that, he swallowed. I'm sorry. Joanna nodded, still staring at the horizon. It's been 3 years. Some days it still feels like yesterday, other days like it never happened at all. They sat in the Mustang for a long time, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. No music, no distractions, just air and memory, and two people suspended in something they didn't have a name for yet. Do you talk about him much? Ethan asked. Not really. People get weird when you bring up the dead. I won't. I know, she said, glancing at him. That's why you're still here. He looked away, suddenly overwhelmed by the intimacy of that statement and by the truth in it. Back at the garage, Ethan helped close up shop. The sun was long gone. The sky painted a deep, dreamy blue as they stowed away tools. He asked, what's the plan for tomorrow? Tomorrow, yeah, I figured we'd keep the streak alive. Joanna arched a brow. You're assuming I want a streak. I'm assuming you don't hate my company, he said, smirking. She gave him a long look, then tossed him a wrench. Be here at noon. I've got a '67 Thunderbird that needs rewiring. Ethan caught the wrench. You trust me not to burn it down? No, she said, but I trust you to show up. That hit harder than it should have. That night, Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Everything about Joanna was different. She wasn't polished or performative. She didn't post filtered selfies or fill silences with filler words. She was sharp and solid and unapologetically herself. He liked that. He also liked the way her hands moved with certainty, how she spoke in short, meaningful sentences, and how, despite everything, she hadn't closed the door to people entirely. She reminded him of old songs, the kind that didn't need a beat drop to stay with you. He wondered if she ever thought about him after he left. Then he wondered why it mattered so much that she did. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm neither of them dared to define. Ethan showed up every other day, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with lunch, always with a new story. Joanna never asked him to come, never said she was expecting him, but every time he walked through the garage's back door, she had a rag in hand and a smirk ready. The Thunderbird needed rewiring, then the Camaro needed brakes, then a neighbor dropped off a busted vintage Vespa, and Joanna handed Ethan the manual without looking up. Your turn, she said. He hadn't planned to spend so much time there, but something about the smell of oil, the classic rock station humming low in the background, and the way she moved, precise, focused, unbothered, made him forget the rest of the world existed. And she didn't ask about the rest of his world, which he found oddly comforting. Until one Thursday afternoon, they were sitting on the curb outside the garage, sharing a greasy bag of onion rings, their hands still stained with engine grime. "What did you do before you started dropping bumpers on women's cars?" she asked. He wiped his fingers on a napkin. "Delivery driver. Still am part-time. Also freelance video editor when work shows up. Mostly weddings, a few music videos. Stuff that makes rent feel like a suggestion." She raised an eyebrow. "You went to school for that?" "Nope. Taught myself. YouTube and caffeine. So you just kind of wandered into it." He looked at her. "Yeah, I guess I've been wandering a lot." She considered that. "Is it lonely?" He shrugged. "Sometimes. But it's also kind of freeing. No one's waiting for me. I can leave, crash into someone's car, and accidentally start learning how to rewire vintage vehicles without anyone asking where the hell I am." Joanna chuckled, then looked down at her hands. Her voice softened. "My husband used to say freedom and isolation look the same if you're too far away." Ethan studied her. "Do you still feel isolated?" She didn't answer right away, then quietly. "Not as much since you showed up." He felt something shift in his chest, like a wrench had clicked into place somewhere he didn't know was loose. That Saturday, the clouds broke again, and Joanna, without ceremony, tossed him the keys to the Mustang. "Drive me somewhere that isn't a junkyard." He blinked. "You're trusting me with both the car and your company. You feeling okay?" "Don't make me regret it." They drove with the windows down and no destination in mind. Eventually, they ended up at the edge of a park overlooking the river trees, bending in the wind, and a family of ducks floating across the water. They sat on a bench, sharing silence in a way that felt heavier than words. Joanna finally spoke. "You know what I hate about grief?" He looked over. "It makes people treat you like glass. Either they avoid you or they pity you, but they stop looking at you like you're a full person." Ethan's voice was quiet. "I don't do that, I know. That's what scares me." He frowned. "Why would that scare you?" "Because I haven't let anyone in since James died, and I don't know what it means that I want to let you." The wind caught her hair, and for once she didn't fix it. Ethan watched her eyes, unapologetic, wide open. He spoke carefully. "I don't need anything from you. I just like being near you. That's all." "That's not all," she said softly. "Not anymore." They stayed at the park until dusk painted the river gold. When he dropped her off, she didn't get out of the car immediately. Instead, she reached for the door handle, paused, then turned to him. "Come in?" He stared at her, heartbeat skipping. "I mean for a drink," she clarified, almost teasing, but her voice betrayed her nerves. He followed her up the narrow staircase to the apartment above the garage. The walls were filled with framed racing photos, hand-drawn blueprints, and shelves cluttered with trophies and engine parts, a world built by a woman who lived with precision and purpose. Joanna poured them 2 whiskeys, no ice, and sat across from him on a battered leather couch. Ethan took a sip. "Let me guess. This is the one thing in your life you don't fix." She smirked. "Some things are better when they burn a little." They talked for hours about nothing and everything, your childhood in Oregon. His failure at opening a taco truck, the time she raced a cocky 19-year-old and beat him by 4 seconds, the time he delivered flowers to a house that turned out to be a funeral. Somewhere between the second pour and a quiet lull, their conversation faded into a comfortable stillness. Then she looked at him, really looked at him, and said the last thing he expected. "I want to kiss you." Ethan blinked. "But I won't," she added almost as fast. "Not yet." He leaned forward slightly. "Why?" "Because I don't want this to be a fluke or a distraction or just something that feels good in the moment." He exhaled slowly. "What if it's none of those things?" She studied him, the edges of her mouth curled in conflict. "Then you'll still be here tomorrow," she whispered. "I will." "And the day after, yes." She nodded, then got up, walked him to the door, and stood there with her hand on the knob. "Don't make me regret letting you in." "I won't," he said, and for the first time Joanna didn't just believe him, she hoped it. The rain came back on a Wednesday. Thin gray sheets slid down the garage windows as Ethan sat underneath the hood of a '72 Charger, oil on his cheek and half a joke hanging on his tongue. Joanna was unusually quiet across the shop, her eyes darting between a checklist and the wall clock. "You good?" he asked, peering out from the engine bay. She hesitated, then wiped her hands on a rag. "You ever have one of those days where you feel everything changing, but nothing's moved?" Ethan chuckled. "Like the pre-earthquake moment." "Yeah, every time I check my bank account." She didn't smile. He stepped out from under the hood, wiping his hands. Joe. She looked at him, really looked. There was something in her eyes, a weight, history, and a hint of fear. I got offered a job. That stopped him cold, a consulting role, racing company in Austin. They want me to train a new engineering team. 6 months, maybe more. Oh, Joanna leaned back against the workbench, arms folded. I didn't apply. An old contact called, said my name came up in a meeting. Apparently, I'm still somebody out there. Of course you are, he said too quickly. Then added, do you want to go? She didn't answer. Ethan nodded once slow. Got it. But the words didn't settle in him. They crashed like a misaligned piston, leaving parts of his chest grinding. I told them I needed time to think, she added. I haven't said yes. He nodded again, this time quieter. What's stopping you? You. The word hit like a tool dropped on concrete, sharp, sudden, irrevocable. I mean, she sighed us. This, whatever this is, Ethan stepped closer. Joanna, I don't want to make this harder, she interrupted. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You were supposed to be a random Tuesday inconvenience. A dent and a sorry and a goodbye. And yet he said softly, and yet she echoed. The silence after was heavy and tender all at once, the kind you could only have with someone who knew your loneliness too well. That night, Ethan walked aimlessly through the city, letting the rain soak through his hoodie. He wasn't the type to wallow. He'd always been good at letting things go, bad jobs, flings, apartments with roaches and thin walls. But this was different. He kept replaying the way she looked at him, the way she said you like it was both a blessing and a curse. At some point, his feet took him to her street. The garage was dark, the upstairs window lit. For a moment, he just stood there watching, not in a creepy way, in a do I knock or walk away forever kind of way. Then the door opened. She stood at the top of the stairs, barefoot, wrapped in an old hoodie. Ethan, I was just passing by. He lied. You suck at lying, she said, stepping aside. Come up. Inside, the place felt smaller, not physically, emotionally, like the air had been folded in on itself. She handed him a towel. He took it, but didn't dry off. I don't want you to stay for me, she said. That's not fair. I wasn't planning to, he replied. I want you to stay for you. Because you're not done here, because you still have something left. She stared at him. That's a nice line. It's not a line, it's a belief. When I didn't have until I met you, she sat on the edge of the couch. He joined her, not close, not far, just there. I don't want to lose this, she admitted. Whatever this is, you won't, he said, because I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. Joanna turned to face him, her eyes suddenly glassy. You don't make this easy. Love's not supposed to be easy. Her breath caught. Is that what this is? He swallowed. Feels like it. A long silence. Then she said, you're too young to talk like that. He laughed once, and you're too alive to hide like this. She reached for his hand, held it, gripped it like a woman who'd already lost once and wasn't sure she could survive it again. He leaned in slowly. She met him halfway. The kiss was quiet, no dramatic music, no spinning room, just lips on lips, a yes finally after so many maybes. The next morning, the garage reopened late. Joanna was already under the hood of the Charger when Ethan strolled in with 2 coffees and a smug grin. She glanced over. Wipe that look off your face. Can't, he said. It's permanent now. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide the smile. So he said carefully, handing her the cup, what about Texas? She took a sip, savoring the heat. I turned it down. Ethan froze. You did. I have unfinished business here. He blinked, like the Charger. She gave him a look, like you dummy. His grin widened. Good, because I was already planning to stick around. Yeah, she asked. Yeah, he said. I think I found the thing I didn't know I was looking for. She tilted her head. What's that? He took a breath, looked her straight in the eye. Home. 6 months later, the garage looked different now, cleaner, warmer. A small neon sign hung in the front window, Reignition Custom Motors Est. By 2 collisions. Ethan stood behind the counter, sketching out a new logo on a napkin while sipping from a chipped mug. The doorbell jingled. Joanna stepped in helmet under her arm hair, wind-tossed and grinning. Test run went smooth, she said. She's ready. Perfect, Ethan replied, coming around the counter. Clients on their way. She leaned in and kissed him brief but enough. You hungry, she asked. I'm craving greasy breakfast food at 3 p.m. He slipped his arm around her. Only if I get to drive. You're still not touching the Mustang. Worth a try. They headed out into the sunlight, two people who'd crashed into each other by accident only to find exactly what they needed. One of the most profound lessons from Ethan and Joanna's story is that life's greatest gifts often come from unexpected collisions, literal or metaphorical. Their chance encounter on a rainy Portland street teaches us that second chances can bloom in the most unlikely moments if we're open to them. Ethan, a drifting delivery driver, and Joanna, a guarded retired engineer, were both stuck in their own quiet struggles. Yet through a minor car accident, they found connection, healing, and purpose. This reminds us that vulnerability and courage can transform fleeting moments into lasting change. It's not about grand gestures, but the small, brave choices like Ethan returning with coffee or Joanna sharing her past that build trust and love. Life doesn't always follow a script. Sometimes it's the detours, the dents, and the silences that lead us home. This story urges us to stay open to see the beauty in broken things and to believe that no matter our age or scars, we're never done finding meaning. What's a moment in your life that felt like a collision but led to something beautiful? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear how your unexpected turns shaped you. If this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Let's keep exploring the lessons life throws our way together. Your support keeps these stories alive, so don't forget to like, share, and ring the bell for more heartfelt tales.